Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the underrated rogue, Cronis. In the last underrated rogues video, you guys suggested a lot of great villains for me to spotlight, which I really appreciate. Cronis here was not suggested by anyone though, instead he's a character I wanted to do from the beginning. However, starting with the next installment, I will start doing some of the rogues requested by you. Anyway, so Cronis made his first appearance in the Atom number 3, published in 1962. The story, titled The Time Trap, was written by Gardner and penciled by Kane. In it we meet David Clinton, a watchmaker in Ivytown who moonlights as the supervillain Cronis, aka the Time Thief. In a brief flashback scene, we're shown that Clinton used to be a petty criminal who had served several prison sentences. During one of these, he came to the realization that he never spent enough time planning his robberies. Inspired by the clockwork routine of prison life, David became obsessed with time and decided to dedicate his criminal career to it. After his release, Clinton came to Ivytown, the Atom City, and styled himself as Cronis, equipped with an array of time-themed weapons and gadgets. He was now finally a successful criminal, that is until he crossed paths with the Atom. Cronis continued to appear throughout the Atom's Silver Age comic title, quickly becoming the Mighty Might's arch-nemesis. Not that there was much competition though, as the Atom barely had any other recurring rogues. In Cronis' third appearance from the Atom number 28, released in 1966, the villain had finally invented a gadget which allowed him to actually manipulate time. In the previous two stories, he just used gimmicks with a time theme, such as a wristwatch that fired buzzsaws, and of course his trademark giant flying sundial. But in Atom 28, Cronis wore a wristwatch that could freeze time in a concentrated area. Alongside the flying sundial, this has since become the character's signature weapon, although it's usually portrayed as a pocket watch. Atom's title was cancelled in the late 60s, and in the 70s the Mighty Might found himself relegated to the backup pages of Action Comics. This didn't really stop the popularity of Cronis, however, as besides making appearances in these backup tales, the Time Thief also entered the DC universe at large. It seemed like almost every time DC did a villain group, be it the Secret Society of Supervillains, the Injustice League, the Injustice Gang, the Crime Champions, Cronis was there. He became one of the go-to rogues of the DC universe. I think this is mainly due to his time gimmick, as it makes him a pretty practical addition to any supervillain team. His status as the Atom's nemesis probably didn't hurt either. In 1983, drastic changes were brought to the world of the Atom. His second solo title was launched in the form of a 4-issue miniseries. This comic, written by John Strad and penciled by Kane, saw the Atom become permanently shrunk down and relocate to a South American jungle where he lived with a tribe of tiny aliens who had crash-landed on Earth years ago. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but it was actually a pretty good series that blended superheroics with swashbuckling fantasy elements. This series continued in the form of 3 one-shot annuals, released in 84, 85, and 88. The Atom's nemesis didn't really fit with his concept, however, so Cronis was left without a home. Instead, the Time Thief continued to appear in other corners of the DC universe, most notably in an issue of World's Finest from 1985 that pitted him against DC's two titans, Batman and Superman. In this story, written by Joey Cavalieri and penciled by Jose Delbo, Cronis has finally managed to build an actual time machine. He's hired by a mysterious character who's hinted at being a future version of Cronis himself to erase the Batman from history. To do so, the Time Thief simply offers Bruce the chance to go back to the day his parents were murdered, giving him the opportunity to save them, thus stopping the events that created the Dark Knight from happening. This issue also fleshed out Clinton's background a bit, establishing that ever since a child he had had an obsession with clocks and their mechanisms. Besides this appearance, Cronis also became a recurring foe in Blue Beetle's mid-80s title, the comic that introduced the original Beetle, Ted Kord, into the DC universe. 1988 finally saw the return of the Atom to human civilization and the launch of his third title and second ongoing title, The Power of the Atom. In the pages of this comic, Cronis has reimagined himself as a more serious villain, complete with a new costume, which has got to be one of the most boring and bland supervillain outfits ever. Nevertheless, with the Atom back in town, the Time Thief decides to get rid of his hated arch-nemesis once and for all, but instead they end up fighting together against an armada of alien troops. As this took place in the middle of DC's Invasion crossover event, an arc that saw Earth under attack by an alliance of various alien races led by the sinister Dominators. Power of the Atom didn't last for very long though, getting cancelled after 18 issues, which meant that Cronis was once again homeless. But he continued to appear throughout the DC universe, and was sort of revamped in the mid-90s, complete with yet another new costume, which I dig, and actual meta-human powers over time, courtesy of the demon Neron. This version didn't last long though, and the character seemingly died by vanishing into time itself. In 1998, an ongoing Cronis title was launched, starring Walker Gabriel, a small-time criminal and old friend of David Clinton. Gabriel inherited Clinton's time tech and gadgetry after his death, and became the second Cronis and an anti-hero of sorts. This title only lasted for 12 issues though, and honestly I haven't read it myself, so I can't say if it's any good. A Cronis who isn't David Clinton just doesn't interest me. A few years later, the original Cronis came back however, because it's comics, and besides, a guy who can manipulate time shouldn't have it so rough resurrecting himself. His next big appearance was in the pages of the all-new Atom, a series launched in 2006, starring the second Atom, Ryan Choi. In this comic, Clinton has teamed up with a new female version of Cronis, calling herself Lady Cronis. This is another series I haven't actually read, because an Atom who isn't Ray Palmer just doesn't interest me. I think you can tell by now, but I really don't like it when a new character takes over the mantle of a classic one. The Flash Rogue Mirror Master is a rare case where I think it worked. I am kind of intrigued by this team-up between Clinton and Lady Cronis though, but I've got other comics to prioritize my money on. Since this, Cronis has made a few appearances here and there, but nothing really major. He appeared briefly during the New 52 era, completely reimagined as an agent of Argus, with metahuman abilities to manipulate time. Besides the comic books, the character has made numerous appearances in animation, including the Justice League Unlimited cartoon show, and of course in Batman the Brave and the Bold. He also appeared in the live-action TV show Legends of Tomorrow, a show I haven't watched. I've read about it though, and apparently he's a bounty hunter sent to capture Rip Hunter and his team. But it later turns out, spoiler alert, that Cronis is in fact not David Clinton, but a future version of Mick Rory, aka Heatwave, a member of Hunter's team. So Heatwave is Cronis? That's ridiculous. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I just absolutely love Cronis. The classic David Clinton version, that is. He's just such a typical comic book supervillain. Just look at his costume. It's so comic booky. Could you imagine that in live action? That would be hilarious. Hilariously awesome. I love it. It's both cool and incredibly goofy at the same time. It's the sort of thing that really only works in comics. I'm also really into characters who can manipulate time for some reason, like the Time Trapper and of course the Clock King on Batman the Animated Series. I don't know what it is, it's just a cool power, like freezing time, slowing time down, and of course traveling through time. Another reason I appreciate Cronis is because he's the only real Atom rogue. Sure, there's the Floronic Man and Bug-Eyed Bandit, but the Floronic Man pretty much left the Atom's rogues gallery decades ago to branch out, and the Bug-Eyed Bandit is just pathetic. Now, I'm not really saying that Cronis is as good of a villain like say the Shade or Sinestro, but he's a pretty fun, colorful rogue with more potential than what is usually given. I think he should appear more in the comics, preferably in a proper Atom title starring Ray Palmer. You could reimagine him as a friend and scientist colleague of Palmer who works on time manipulation while Ray is working on tricking stuff. Clinton then grows obsessed with his research, goes insane and becomes Cronis, around the same time as Palmer becomes the Atom. Maybe the suit could be what gives him the time manipulation powers. That would be a good excuse for him to wear it. Cronis should also be the main villain in an Atom movie, although I doubt we'll ever get an Atom movie because of Marvel's Ant-Man. The general public would just see it as an Ant-Man ripoff, not realizing that the Atom was created first. Anyway, what do you think of Cronis? Do you think he's a cool rogue, or do you think he's a total goofball? Let me know in the comments. And remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.